Today's meeting is open to the public. A warm welcome to you all. My name is Councillor Simon Clement-Jones, and I'm chair of this local area committee. Before I ask my colleagues to introduce themselves, I'll hand over to the committee clerk, Philippa Burdett, to read out the housekeeping arrangements.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. Before we start, there's just a few housekeeping arrangements to mention. Please can I request that mobile telephones and other such equipment are switched to silent so as not to disturb the conduct of the meeting. There's no fire test planned for today. If there is an emergency evacuation, please take instruction from the council staff present. The toilet facilities are situated behind me. The ladies on this side, disabled there. If you need access to the men's toilets, we can guide you through the building. Just ask a member of staff. The meeting today is open to the public and will be streamed live and for subsequent broadcast via the council's website. You should be aware that the council is a data controller under the Data Protection Act. Data collected during this webcast will be retained in accordance with the council's published policy. By entering the meeting room, you are consenting to being filmed and the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting. One final thing to mention, we have hearing loops available. If you'd like to use one, please let us know.
Thank you very much. Can I now ask the members to introduce themselves, starting with Councillor Turpin?
Paul Turpin, Green Councillor for Gleadless Valley.
Ruth Ralph, Nether Edge and Sharrow, Green Councillor.
Richard Shaw, Lib Dem Councillor for Beecham and Greenhill Ward and Deputy Chair of this committee.
Mohammed Maroof, Graves Park, Lib Dem.
Councillor Ian Auckland, Lib Dem Councillor for Graves Park Ward.
Marianne Elliott, Green Councillor for Gleadless Valley.
Nika Bishara, Labour Councillor for Nether Edge and Sharrow.
Good evening, Ibiullah, Labour's Councillor for Nether Edge and Sharrow.
Alexi Diamond, Green Party Councillor for Gleadless Valley.
And I'm Councillor Fran Belbin, Deputy Leader of the Council and visiting today.
And thank you very much indeed. Come along, Councillor Belbin. Before we proceed with the agenda, I'd just like to explain how the meeting will work. We'll deal with the formal business first, so any apologies, declarations and the minutes of the previous meeting. We'll then have some time for public questions and petitions, and I've had some prior notice of questions in advance. We do have one written question. So I will be calling people who, as I say, I've told them they want to ask a question beforehand. Then we'll have some questions on some issues that I know locally are going to be, well, almost certainly to be asked. And then, if time, we'll have time for some questions. And then after that, Councillor Belbin would like to have a few words with you. Following this, Homaira Ibrahim, Equalities and Engagement Officer for Sheffield Council, will talk to us about the Sheffield Race Equality Commission and its key recommendations for the city and next steps. We'll then allow some more public questions if there's time. Diane Owens, the LAC manager, will then give a brief update on the local area committee budget for this year. And at the close of the formal meeting, there will be an opportunity to join workshops to talk about the Race Equality Commission and how we can work together to improve race equality in our city. Have we received any apologies? No apologies, thank you. We then move to exclusion of press and public. I don't think there are any items that require the exclusion of the public and press. Can I ask if any members wish to declare an interest in any item of business on the agenda? That's a no. So then we're on to the minutes. If I can ask members to approve as correct record the minutes of the last meetings held on the 16th of March this year and 17th of May. Can't see anyone objecting. Thank you all very much indeed. Okay. So in terms of questions, we do have a written question from Simon Duffy. Aha, thank you. Do we have a microphone? It's for the webcast, and obviously anyone who has difficulty hearing.
That was at the last public meeting, I made a very simple proposal that councillors, perhaps representatives from each of the three major parties, officers and some interested citizens could begin the process of ending loneliness in Sheffield, starting in South Lack. That there are some well-established methods that are effectively costless or very low cost to do that. We can bring in expertise from places like Froome, where they've already made significant progress. So it was a simple suggestion for action. I know that there's some record of this in the minutes. And I was just really wanting to follow up some months later whether we could begin this simple process.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any of my colleagues, Councillor Bashrat? Oh, you didn't put your hand up, sorry. Any other colleagues want to comment this before I come in? Oh, sorry, you do. Go for it, yes.
Thank you for raising this again. I can remember when this was brought to our attention at the last meeting. And I think I mentioned it would be quite good for us to actually have a discussion around it, and especially loneliness is a big problem across the board, and working with constituents and people in the community, and this is one area that definitely needs looking into. And I think if there is something that you're proposing, I would be willing to, look into that alongside everybody else.
Thank you. Anyone else want to comment? I think I said at the last meeting. Obviously, we were heading into an election. I didn't know who might be on the local area committee at this point. Obviously, we've had that election. We now know. As I said, we do have new members. I think obviously we need to bring up to speed. We're having a meeting a week on Thursday as members, and one of the items on that agenda is what we're going to be doing for the next year. So that's going to be really, I think, the most appropriate venue for us to take this further. As I say, I think certainly raise some interesting ideas, and we're certainly going to be looking at this at our meeting to take it forward and see how we can integrate this and take it further. As I say, Councillor Bashrat and would like to take a lead on this, then that would be great. But as I say, certainly we're on with it. I'm sorry the council doesn't move at a great speed sometimes, but hopefully we'll get some momentum up on this. Thank you.
Simon.
Thank you for raising this. I was thinking really a good place to start would be to look at what's happening already, because I know in my ward in Gleadless Valley, for example, the Healy Trust put on so many different things, and there's something on every day, from chair aerobics to women's wellness to all sorts of groups that, we could start by mapping the things that are already available to people. And I think we could probably do that at a ward level, because perhaps it's too wide at LAC level, and have a representative from each ward to start doing that, to start mapping the activities that are already available, because I'm sure there are quite a lot in each ward, and that would be a good place to start.
Thank you. Councillor Harris?
Sorry. Yes, I spoke with our previous meetings about this, but unfortunately the lessons got in the way, and it was a bit awkward to move it forward at that point in time. I actually agree with Marianne's suggestion that there is practice out there in each of the wards across the South Lack area, including, not least of all, the voluntary sector and other providers, the health services, GP practices, and so on and so on. I do think that we engage with straying on to this meeting we're going to have next week, when we can sort of thrash it out in more detail. But I do agree with Councillor Elliott that I think it's probably best to start with, this is what I'm going to propose, that it's best to start with some mapping what is happening in each of the individual neighbourhoods within the wards currently, as an initial starting point to see how we can move it forward. I mean, there is a link with the joint health and well-being strategy that was created in 2018, and that runs out next year, 2024. But at that point in time, the local area committees and the South Local Area Committee went in existence at that time. So I think it's a good opportunity to also develop a wider citywide refresh of that strategy.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you, Mr. Duffy, for bringing this back to us and reminding us. Oh, we've got somebody else. Thank you, Councillor Ruller.
Thank you, Chair. A very quick point. I went to Age UK website and I typed in loneliness, and they've got this fantastic facility where if you type in the postcode, it will tell you different level of risk of loneliness in your area. And I learned today, that Chair, that there's certain parts in Sharrow, there's a very high risk of people suffering from loneliness. So I think something that I would definitely like to support and work with colleagues, Councillor Basharat and others, to tackle. And it's very close to my heart as well. I've got an elderly mother, and I know the challenges that they face. Thank you.
Thank you all very much indeed. We'll move on to the kind of the general questions. I have been informed there's a question from Isabel O'Leary about the Rose Garden Cafe and the Norton Nursery site. Also, Anita from Louise Hayes' office has asked if she can ask a question. I then understand that there may well be some people who like to ask some questions on red lines, so we'll have a bit of a section on that. And Archer Lanes also seems to be a hot issue. So what I want to do is try and make sure that everyone who wants to ask a question can ask a question. So if you can be as brief as possible in both your question. I can ask my colleagues to be brief in their answers. As I say, there will also be hopefully a chance for questions after that if there's time. So can I ask Isabel O'Leary to ask her question? Well, if I can ask you to ask question one, and then we'll do question two after that. Thank you.
Thanks. Can anyone on this committee give an update on the Rose Garden Cafe in Graves Park? Committee members may be aware that 10,500 people signed a petition to save the cafe, and I hope you're aware that many other park users, past, present and future, won't accept demolition as an option. And I'm wanting to know whether discussions between the relevant people have taken place yet for the restoration plan and its funding. And please bear in mind that the Friends of Graves Park have put in an application for substantial government funding for the purpose of restoring the building. And they've been given reason to be optimistic that they'll be successful. So can you reassure me that SCC is not being deliberately obstructive, but instead is paralysed by bureaucracy?
Thank you. I'm afraid I have no particular update, but I'm certain my colleagues from Graves Park may. Councillor Auckland.
So, I don't know to what extent I'd say the council is paralysed by bureaucracy more than normal. One of my jobs is to be chair of the charities subcommittee, along with Councillor Belbin is a member. I think it's great news that the Friends have put in for substantial funding, and I have been on record in the council saying no to demolition and save our cafe. And I actually think members want to save the cafe. But there is an issue with the front wall. It's definitely bowing, and the question is whether that wall needs to come down, whether it can be propped. Now, I don't know if you're a friend of Graves Park itself, so there is some move to press for a survey by a structural engineer who is particularly qualified in looking after old buildings. But there have been several inspections of that cafe by qualified surveyors, but not structural engineers. And the structural engineer who has looked at it reports that the front wall is dangerous. Now that is actually a fact. There is a definition in the Royal Institution of British Architects definition of what constitutes a wall that's leaning too much to constitute a dangerous building, and personally I think it's a fact. It's dangerous. So the issue arises around the solution. Now, I think the last meeting, and I sit with officers and the Friends and the Save Rose Garden Cafe, and it was a little while ago, was, do we accept that position? Now, I don't think that it's absolutely clear. I thought at the last time I sat round the table with other people, I thought it was accepted that something has to be done about the front wall. But there are people, and from the Friends group, to my understanding, I've seen some drawings today by an architect suggesting that propping will be the answer. Now, propping will be cheaper than rebuilding that front wall. We happen to have in the new councillor here, Councillor Mohammed Maroof, another chartered surveyor, so he's got. So the answer to that is there are still some questions to be asked about the front wall, and to what extent does it need propping or replacing. If you want my personal view, the advisors, so the people who will advise myself and Councillor Belbin here, are definitely of the opinion that the front wall needs to come down and be replaced. For sure.
Thank you, Councillor Auckland. Councillor Aries? Oh, sorry, did you not?
No,
Councillor Maroof.
Just following on from what Ian has just been saying, I was actually present at a meeting where the two conflicting reports were actually reported back to the officers. And I must admit there's a big gap between what the officers seem to think is the cost for actually refurbishing, or more to the point trying to demolish the building, to what the building surveyor that the Friends have actually employed, who is an expert in historic buildings, and as Councillor Auckland said, I dabble in there as well, slightly, but I'm not a structural engineer. But there can be all sorts of opinions, but in my opinion, and I'm being brutally honest about this, the figures that the City Council have come up with, I have a great deal of angst over. It's far too high. I think there are solutions that we can reach, and I do agree that we don't want a paralysis of officer decisions on this. We really need to nail down and sort this out, because it can only be getting worse as it moves on. But there is a difference of opinion, and we will continue to push for the fact that there should be an immediate decision reached on this, not only because it's an important building for the people in the area, but it's also a charitable trust that is Graves Park, and we have a responsibility as a local authority that is responsible for the trust to make sure that we actually have a building that is suitable and a grounds that are suitable for people to use. If we can't, then we might as well just hand it back to somebody else. So that's my brutal, honest answers. Thank you.
Thank you. And we now have a question on Norton Nurseries site.
Thank you. So again about Graves Park, the Norton Nurseries site now. At the Charity Trustee Subcommittee last October, the chair of the Friends of Graves Park said that the Friends have been waiting for 7 years for permission to extend the arboretum that they've already created to bring back more of the Norton Nurseries site to parkland for public use. This would be at no cost to the council, as the Friends would fund it and do the work. At that meeting in October, the answer given by the Charity Trustee Subcommittee was that this extension cannot be allowed, as SCC needs this area to run operations for Graves Park and the local area. Councillors on this committee may not be familiar with the area of Norton Nurseries, but I walk regularly into the current arboretum, and I can look through the fence into the area that's proposed for the arboretum extension, and I often take photographs. I can assure you that apart from the occasional truck bringing waste to put into a skip and a heavy vehicle or two in one corner of the area, it's not used by SCC operations, leaving aside the misuse of Norton Nurseries as a waste transfer site, which may or may not be licensed. Does this committee not agree that someone with a bit of logistical intelligence could certainly work out how to use the space more efficiently, allowing the Arboretum to be extended as planned over 7 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm not an expert on this area. Thank you, Councillor Auckland.
I mean, I did make reference to this in the minutes last time round. It's just a minor correction. I've checked into this. The council doesn't need a licence so long as it's only storing waste there very temporarily, and it moves it straight on. So I slightly misspoke when I said it is a waste transfer station. It doesn't need a licence. I don't think a waste transfer station should exist on Parkland, and I've spent a long time saying that. So 7 years is far too long for it to be in that situation. For not quite 7 years, and perhaps it's bureaucracy totally paralysed and COVID, the council has been looking at something called a depot strategy. And this is all to do with moving out of certain sites and consolidating its requirements on probably, just my guess, Staniforth Road, big area there, and Manor Lane. So there's work going. It hasn't reached a conclusion yet. For what it's worth, the person in charge of the Park Service informally said to me, look, Ian, we want to get out of there as soon as possible, and as soon as possible we will go. Now, people must form their own opinion about how that's 4 years or 7 years or how long this review's been going on. But I was assured that there is a great desire to turn over the land. Now, I do agree that there should be some attempt to make some space to make progress with the extension. Because, in my book, that land's parkland. It's probably a campaign I was elected on 24 years ago. So
ask you
that's
to,
where we are.
Thank you.
I agree with the questioner pretty much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Auckland. Anyone else want to speak on this? No, thank you. So I've got Anita from from Louise Hayes' office.
So I wanted to ask about Low Edges Festival and what the LAC can do to ensure that it goes ahead this year, what resources and funding they can put into it, and what they can do to ensure that it goes ahead every single year so the community doesn't lose this fabulous festival.
Councillor Shaw.
Well, thank you for your question. Obviously, when the news emerged a couple of weeks ago that the current organisers of the festival said that they can't put it on this year, local councillors and supported by officers from the LAC, we've been having conversations with the organisers to see if it's possible to put on a more scaled down event this year, because it's quite clear, like a major event like this, we're less than 30 odd days from when it would normally take place. It would be very difficult to organise a major event that attracts more than 12,000 visitors, including visitors from outside of Sheffield, major events, stalls and other things, in that time. So we've been very much focused on trying to support the organisers to organise a smaller scale event. We've also been trying to help them find new volunteers to come forward, because one of the issues is that the present organisers are retiring. So we need more volunteers to hopefully take over the festival so that it returns next year and on a sustainable basis. Because what we don't want is to just pump a load of money into it like this year and then it never happen. Can never happen again. It needs to be on a sustainable basis going forward and self-sustaining.
Thank you, Councillor Bashfat.
I just wanted to say I was recently made aware of this, and it is quite sad, especially when working in the community. I do understand, the benefits of our festivals. We've just recently had 2 in our ward. Again, due to COVID and stuff like that, festivals didn't take place. And we know the impact it had on many people. So these festivals mean a lot, and the positive impact it has on people and their well-being. So I was quite concerned in terms of not having much funding for this. When if I'm right, it's been a festival that's been happening throughout the years. So it's something, with any festival or anything that brings people together, I think something I would like to bring it back to our members when we have our meeting. We can discuss this on where we can actually find and help towards any funding and the volunteering side. Happy to actually put that on the agenda for our own discussion and then get back to you, Anita. Okay.
Thank you. Just at this point, I would like to put on record my thanks to Steve and Rich, who and the festival organising committee, who have put on a great festival year after year. Obviously, Stephen wants to retire, so we do wish him a very happy retirement. Unfortunately, we couldn't find anyone to take it over, and it is the South Local Area Committee is going to be doing all it can to make sure it is, and I know the 3 local councillors really want to support it as well. And so we'll move on to the next question. I have had 2 people indicate they'd like to ask a question. The gentleman here with the stick and the gentleman behind him. I just want to ask, is this on Red Lines or Archer Lane?
Only tangentially.
Okay, I'll leave it until then. So what I do want to do is have a period of time to discuss Red Lines, a period of time to discuss Archer Lane, just so that we can make sure everyone gets a chance to speak. I will allow 7-10 minutes for each one. So anyone who'd like to speak on Red Lines, please put your hand up. Nobody on Red Lines? Oh, okay. Archer Lane? No? Okay. Well, you tangential Archer Lane, and then you sell afterwards. No, that's fine. Off you go.
Thank you very much.
Should you start with your name, please?
I'm Viv Lockwood. I'm Secretary of the Bannercross Neighbourhood Group. My colleague here is Vice Chair of our group. As you know, or may remember, if you were here at a meeting a couple of meetings ago, I did actually speak about Archer Lane. But I'm not going to rehearse any of that. But something, don't worry, Chair. But something has come out recently, and it's a result of where the council is at the moment in conducting the survey, which is going to present the results of it to the committee later on. A couple of months ago, just before the local election, we attended a meeting of London Road traders organised by Councillor Basharat there, which was attended by the senior officer, Tom Finnegan-Smith, in the Transport Department, and also by the previous council leader, Terry Fox. And we were given 2 promises, and this is the purpose of what I'm speaking for now. The first promise was that, and the promise came from the officer, the first promise was that all data collected about emissions would be made available to us, including where the monitoring sites are precisely, what data was being collected from them, and how that monitoring was taking place, on what days and times of the week, and so on. As you know, probably, originally the whole business of the active neighbourhood wasn't supposed to, or wasn't designed to include air quality. It's been forced onto the agenda, and we got a promise, very quickly, we got that promise that emissions data would be sent to us. We've asked 4 times now and we've not received it. The second one, very quickly, is that we also received another promise that when the officer report was written, before it went to committee, there would be a time when it was made available for public inspection and examination. Rather like Councillor Maroof there, we've become very jaundiced about the data that the departments of the council put out. We're especially jaundiced about the transport department, and we want to make sure that all data can be interrogated properly by us and the public generally. Any help you can give us in that regard, we'll be very grateful for.
Thank you for your question. Does any of my colleagues have a question? Councillor Shaw.
Thank you for your question. Myself and Councillor Orkin, we're actually on the Transport Committee, as I think I said last time you came. In terms of the report, basically, as soon as it's made available to councillors, it should be available on the published on the council's website, which is usually 1 to 2 weeks before the date of the meeting. So you should have at least a week to review it, and then if you have any questions, you can bring it along to the committee itself. Well, I don't know.
Councillor Bashrat.
Thank you, Viv. First of all, sorry that you've not actually been able to get the answers to your questions. But what I can say, one of the things, I'm not going to go back on to, like other stuff because many people are aware, but what I am pushing for is for a public meeting, which I've requested the officers before the report and the recommendations of all the 3 schemes go into this transport meeting, to have a public meeting so that the data from the 6 months trial can be actually talked through and shared with the residents and the people who are concerned. One, because of the, which as you've mentioned and how I've heard from constituencies, the transparency and the trust and all of that, to be able to bring that data in front of us, to talk through the data, what their findings are, and then for the public to be able to ask any questions. And I feel that is one way of making sure that the data is presented to the public before it goes to the final transport department, where the voting will be taking place, and depending on what the votes are and decisions can be made. So that's just something that we are pushing for, and I've not received a response yet, but I'm still hoping to push for that and let people know.
Thank you for that. Councillor Turpin.
Oh dear. Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to note that the data that you can't collect is how many children and young people have not been seriously injured or killed in this period of time. And Sheffield has the most dangerous roads in the country. The figures for seriously injured and killed people under 15 are double that of the second highest of the core cities. And of course it is ultimately a road safety measure and can give children the confidence to get to school safely by using a bicycle perhaps. And it's just really important to remember that it's a road safety measure primarily, and you cannot count the number of children who have been saved by.
Thank you, Councillor Roof.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure who made these promises, and unfortunately I wasn't privy to these private meetings held between the traders group and the Labour councillor over there. But what I can say is that obviously this scheme, it was a trial. It's still we're still within the trial period, the 18-month trial period, and if no decision is made by the end of the 18 months, then those measures will have to be ripped out. However, it will be going to committee soon, and all that evidence will be looked at. Unfortunately, I am not a member of that committee, so there's not much I can do about that. But I'm sure the members of that committee will be scrutinising that data in quite a lot of depth, and hopefully they'll be able to give or vote based on the data. So that's as much as I can say on that. Just in regards to these promises that have been made, I think in regards to the data is available, and if you did want that data, I'm sure if you did ask the officers again, they'd be able to give that data to you, especially around how many vehicles travelled up and down Bannerdale Road in a set period of days, or how many cars didn't go along Archer Lane on a set period of days. Then that data is available, similar to the data that was available around Sheldon Road, and how many cars turned right and left on Sheldon Road between peak times and non-peak times. And interestingly enough, quite a lot of residents, I think it was at the end of May, received some documentation through the post with a summary of that data. But if you want a quick overview of that data, I'll be more than happy to give you that overview at the end of this meeting today.
Thank you, Councillor Roof. I've got Councillor Ulla, then Councillor Basharat.
Hi, Viv. First of all, thank you for everything you do for Banner Cross Neighbourhood Group. I know it's a well-respected organisation. I live near you, so thank you very much for that. In terms of Archer Lane, there was a perception survey that expired on 28th of June. I called, me and Councillor Basharat, who called for the extension of this survey. We were only allowed 1 week. We thought that this survey should have been extended longer. We've had a number of constituents approaching us that they can't access this online survey due to language or IT barriers. I fully support the call for a public meeting, like Councillor Basharat, to ensure that every data that's available gets scrutinised by residents and in a spirit of transparency and openness. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Basharat.
Sharing this. Just wanted to correct Councillor Maroof. The Whole Bay Centre private meeting is publicly shared. It's for anybody and it's cross-party. So it was more for the business voice that was shared, that lacking their voice in terms of their issues. So it was just something that I put in place, open to anybody and everyone. In terms of the data, yes, the data is available, and constituents have shared that they don't, some of the data they don't understand, and I'm just going to be open and honest. I'm not a transport expert, and half the information went above my head as well. So when the officers actually talked us through the data, it made sense, and I was able to ask questions where I wasn't sure about. So what that does is, if something important is coming into your area, I think it's every resident's right to understand what is happening, and for them to actually be able to share their voice and understand what's happening. So I think those were the reasons why I pushed for, asked and requested the public meeting, so that we can actually be able to see the data presented by the officers who are experts in that field, and be able to share it so that we can ask any questions. It might be that the data is all something that we all think, oh yeah, this is okay, but till it's not out there, you don't know. And this was only because the data that's shared on the website, not many people, like Councillor Hibby mentioned, IT, accessibility and language barriers, which our ward obviously is diverse, and we have to try to accommodate that everybody's voices and concerns are put forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Maroof.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. First of all, I think what Councillor Basharat was aiming at was the other Maroof, not Councillor Rauf. So I'd like to correct that. I don't want to be associated with something that I never said. So we'll correct that one first. I'm entirely confused by all this, just listening to all this data issue and whether data is available or not available. And I think it's going way above my head already. And when the data is available, is anybody going to be able to interpret it in the way that it should be interpreted? Because everybody, quite rightly, would have a different opinion on the data. Data is like that, statistically, but there are issues, obviously, around green. But I am now talking as if I may, Chair, as a resident of the area, if I may. There are major issues that people keep talking about in Nether Edge and Sharrow. There's Brincliffe Edge, which is very, very tight, and I use it every day, and you can't get two cars going through there. And you've seen signs going up saying, please open Archer Lane. I'm making no comment on that because that's not my ward, and it'd be wrong of me to do so. You look at Sheldon Road, which has pretty much become a car park, all the way from the Abbeydale Road, going all the way up to Machin Bank. I'm not saying we shouldn't be doing anything, but what it seems to be doing, And what people keep telling me is that it's just moving traffic from one area to another area. And is the health and well-being of people on Sheldon Road not as valuable as the health and well-being of somebody who lives, dare I say it, and please forgive me for this, around Archer Lane? I believe everybody should have the same right to clean air. But all we've done, and I urge the members who are in that area to go and stand on Sheldon Road and watch it from 8 o'clock until, not literally, obviously, from 8 o'clock until about 8 o'clock at night. It never used to be like that. All that's happening now, it's moving on to Abbeydale Road. And if Abbeydale...
I could ask you to...
Very quickly. And then it moves on to our ward, which is Grace Park, and traffic moving towards Woodseats. So I'm totally confused. I think it needs something. It doesn't need well, probably needs a public meeting, Chair, but I think there should be some further clarity on this, if I'm having to speak about it.
Thank you, Councillor Maroof. Councillor Diamond?
Yeah, just want to come back. I'm very disappointed that Councillor Maroof there has prejudged the data, because all the other data from around the country says that there is actually very little displacement over time from active traffic neighbourhoods, and it actually decreases the amount of cars on our road, which is exactly what we need to do. And I'm quite dismayed at the lack of concern for how many children are killed in Sheffield from both Labour and Lib Dems at all stages in every committee meeting I've ever been to. We've got the most dangerous roads in the country. We need to do something about it, and one of the measures to put in place is active travel neighbourhoods. They do actually decrease traffic. If you look at the report, I'm not going to prejudge the data, but let's see what it says about the traffic in Never Edge and Sharrow, and let's make a decision based on the evidence instead of preconceived ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thornton.
Okay. I just want to come back on that a little bit, because I do think it's quite appalling, actually, for you to suggest that councillors across this table do not care about children's safety. I really take it seriously, and appreciate it. Also, I'm sure all colleagues across all parties. Now, you say it's a conceived idea later, but as a council experience going up and down, I live around them, and they come to listen. They actually to listen. He wasn't saying them as negative. We do need forum for people. Can keep doing it. No, we have to support. People are here, and we're here to.
Sorry, once had a
thank Councillor. I'm appointed in one of the committee will tackle parking, danger, school. This is health for this committee. And if of that, yeah, I would. Well, Councillor Dunn, but yeah, specific lane scheme I'll be received. I shouldn't. In the and not be seen, but I should increase in conjunction of that. The
public transport still far portion of people on the bus and cars much more per person. So that's the particular. That's a comment.
On opportunity.
I'm wrong.
Thank you.
Roads. No other colour. There's colour. But you care more.
Thanks for talking. I think I've to ask a question. Lady in joy and thank you. Can't.
Name is they want to from they are in food. I rang about weeks ago. I was some appointment to come. We rang. Same company. One of my back from. Never heard him. And when you from us, you should ask. There's another say.
Jim?
This market falls not coming. Another concept tonight is not from her throat. I'm here. Problem sense of which
Not to come in any
is it that you know that
I think
football and play damage party for to put in the red park and see the council brown cup photograph. So
okay, Mr. Giving you
I'm sorry.
Personally, I know has been. We're doing. If you have your councillors, those look at them.
Sit. Please. I came.
I'm giving you a great deal of time.
Can there come highly is it really a road?
If you got specifically get into. Thank you, Mr.
Question. I live on one that Homaira Park to talk about how the pavement. We got council pavements dismissed. And then Amy problem the is involved in Golden Road. We put a petition and then the whole class to the giant on the roof both sit on board, but even for what until next year on. But that's of course the actual pavements to ask particular why it's just have a problem.
Question, Marion. So we did some Ralph of the local one visit. Now that trees in Sheldon, as you know, resurface. You know, they act in the court. And one of the reasons of the road is agree with you.
Councillor Diamond.
Well, because of how pavements are difficult. As you're aware, the plan for the tree, which your street, and but that was by because for park places. Taking far, but that aim and that so other you receive the committee, but satisfied with the received is seen committee address. Thank you.
Chair. Okay, conversation that I would agree that good idea that and suggestion for Eastern Street Committee could look might help. We do have on that road. Just confirm Western Street.
So
a lot of my name is finished in Low Edge is so a lot of concern about the state of so people who rehouse to get property. People if council why has not since the this was about quality announcements, reality kind of stuff, knowing whether it's open or not. Our work is the so residents travel green or the city difficult. Thank you.
It's new to me. I understand the difficulties facing, so into else as well. It has looked well because local residents comparing it when your local apartment accessibility, vulnerable students. Take that up on my word. Willing to actually happen. Your contact.
Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Joy. I'm one of the for the prize of my unfortunately related to for repairs. I'm aware there were to close for 2020. We as opposed, we at the lobbying open pandemic under the Jordan was only now that's accepted being as a base now to so is to be doing this because on bus from and that goes to Green. It's a residence in so and so we our radar.
Councillor Shaw.
Apologies, it is sent. It's good to see you. I think if I'd raised and in private on housing committee there, but I'll speak. You can get an update. I do have some full just to actually where the repair at the public meeting. I think overall it's been COVID avoid in disrepair money and off how much money all of that. I want to answer quick enough and lower and across speak for the something that our teeth in.
Thank you. Final question.
What was your name?
Local resident. This active
and everything. Speak with here. Mr. Demon to my roof and to the truth, but the safely goal. It's not that what so these children in locked. What's my car? Children messages is the traffic on ships near there. What point? Close should save a little more. The reality. School. Crime will come down. For the trouble, Oliver planning to go. I'd like to see. Tell me how they. It's a turning for school. Cycles. It's danger. Experience will visit.
Thank you. Question? I'm not sure. Got you. That for you. Ruth? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think is Bishop just a mosque go and difference see. So I'm able to been there. Can I give in that residents is go to the end is enter the mosque park with the that the explanation the flag there the there must be localized the parking issue. The police is contacted. The police matter. Can I please suggest consider a yellow computers? And my question: can this ties to as we to the car residents are in the school can deal with this.
Councillor Diamond.
Informed and masjid resident and taken from the discussion I because it's a resident try something. Well, this is what or conversation contact with and using petrol and oil, exchanging oil while on the road, which is quite dangerous. So all this is actually being reported. The road is being monitored. Residents and the masjid have been informed. This is information I was given, which I've shared with the residents and the masjid, is to ring 101 to report the incidents when it happens, and priority is will be taken to actually send officers down. In terms of the double yellow lines, because there's no double yellow lines, obviously it's in the middle, so discussions and suggestions have been made for a yellow box or a keep clear mark, so that, because obviously nothing's working at the moment, so maybe what residents must have said, if something like that was put in place, maybe that will give an indication, and if people did park in the middle, they will know the consequences, and they can be obviously charged for that. So that's where things are for feedback, where things are, but they are regularly updated on that.
Councillor Diamond?
Yeah, thank you very much. So, I mean, from the problem that you described, and thanks for the question, the issue is that it's not just Sheldon Road that's a car park, it's the whole of Sheffield that is a car park. Unfortunately, the number of cars on the roads has almost doubled since 1990, and our streets were just not fit to accommodate this many cars. And another issue is that the cars have got bigger and bigger. Like, cars continue to grow in size, even though we're in a climate emergency. We can't go on this way. It's completely unsustainable. With regards to the specific problem, it does sound like it's something that the police that should enforce rather than the council at this time, because it's a blockage of the highway. So that should be a police matter. I know in the southwest, been prioritising dangerous parking and enforcement of dangerous parking that obstructs the pavement and the highway, and they've got something called Op Park Safe there. Sorry, northwest, that's right. That is something that would be great if the police rolled out across the city. I think it's probably something that if you ever have a chance to consult with the police, we should be demanding that they look again. We also need powers from central government to enforce bans on pavement parking in order to make the streets safe for pedestrians, for children, for disabled people, for people in prams, people using pushchairs. But yeah, unfortunately the issue is, and the elephant in the room is, there are too many cars and we can't accommodate them in our streets. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dunn. Councillor Roof?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. First of all, I'd just like to clarify, I'm sure we can have a conversation after, whether it's you've had a conversation with parking services about them refusing to enforce illegal parking, so cars parked on double yellows when they shouldn't be parked on double yellows, or whether it's actually blocking the highway. So I'm sure we can have a conversation about that afterwards. But just in regards to the fly tipping, I'm sure if the members here on this table would be minded, maybe we could all vote and put some money towards a camera at the end of Leyburn Road that would help catch some of these criminals that are fly tipping. But obviously that's a conversation to be had within the group at a later date, and that's something I will raise with this South Flat. Thank you.
Thank you for that, which brings us to the end of questions. Councillor Bilbin has asked to... oh, sorry.
Just one last
it is a second bite on this. Very quickly, thank you.
Just wanted to point out, because Sheldon Road is mentioned, we have raised the safety measures on Sheldon Road because a lot of residents wanted some sort of safety measures, so some puffing crossing or zebra crossing has been put forward, and we're just hoping to hear the response for that. So we have been informed of some of the difficulties for vulnerable people.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, if I can ask, you've got one there. Councillor Belbin, take it away.
Thank you. I'll come round the side so I'm not behind a speaker. I just wanted to very quickly introduce myself. As I mentioned before, I am the Deputy Leader of the Council, and one of my roles this year is as Chair of the Governance Committee. And one of the things that we're committed to doing this year is looking at our democratic engagement and how we can improve that right across the council. So obviously local area committees are one of the ways that we're engaging with communities. I'm really interested to hear how members of the public feel they're going and what we can do more to enable members of the public to have more say over their local decision making and to get involved with creating solutions and creating the kind of neighbourhoods they want to live in. So I'm touring the local area committees. It's great to see that they're all different because they are all responding to local needs, but we're always looking for ways to improve. Some of that is in response to the Trees report, some of it is in response to the Race Equality Commission, which I know you're going to be discussing later, and I'll be really interested to hear how members of the public and our citizens in Sheffield want to respond to that. But I just wanted to encourage you really to come and have a chat if you're interested in those kinds of ideas and what we can do better as a council to listen to you and involve you in our decision making. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Belvin, and thank you for your support of the local area committees and the devolution. We're trying to do for the town hall to bring this to you, the people of Sheffield, to be more accountable and hopefully be a better council itself. So we now have. I'll now hand over to Homaira Ibrahim, Equalities and Engagement Officer, who's going to talk to us about Sheffield's Race Equality Commission. Right.
Hello everybody, my name is Homaira Ibrahim. I'm an Equality and Engagement Officer that works within the Equality team at the Council, and I've come along today just to educate you really on the Race Equality Commission that took place. Some of you might be aware of it, some of you might not be aware of it, so this is really just an education session to kind of get that information out to you, the citizens of Sheffield. Next slide please. Okay, so by the end of this, it's going to be very, very brief. I'm going to kind of just tell you where we are so far, the story that's come before today, and just a brief overview of the REC and the recommendations it stated. I'm going to update you on where we are now and where we are as a whole city commitment. There's going to be a bit of time to reflect, so practice can be progressive, as an anti-racist ethos needs to be embedded in all areas of our work, and then really just to get your feedback on first of all, were you aware of it? Are you aware of what you can do to implement this? And just so we can start working collectively as citizens of Sheffield. Next slide, please. Okay, so brief overview. The Race Equality Commission was commissioned in 2001. It's really important that I kind of say Sheffield City Council commissioned it, but this is not owned by Sheffield City Council. This is a city-wide commission, so this affects all organisations across Sheffield. So it doesn't sit with Sheffield City Council. This is for the universities, this is for the hospitals, the police, all the organisations, the key anchor institutions across Sheffield are accountable for this. So it involved an independent chair who worked with 24 commissioners, and they spent lots and lots of time. Over 150 pieces of written evidence were given, and hours of recordings were also transcribed. All of these workshops, they are online for you to have a look at, so it involved people from communities coming to speak to the commissioners about their experience and lived experiences of race and race outcomes. And then what happened afterwards, obviously, was that the commission made their recommendations. So it was a commission to look at the nature and extent of racism across racial disparities across the city of Sheffield, and it prioritised 6 areas. So it looked at education, business and employment, health, civic life, communities, crime and justice, and sport and culture. So it came out to it, listened to all the evidence, obviously, the Commission looked at it all, and then a big report was written. You have got summary reports around today. Again, it's on the internet, it's on the City Council internet, the full report. So it pulled together all the evidence and it came out with 7 recommendations, and under each recommendation sits lots and lots of individual targets. And again, I have bought copies of those individual targets for you to have a look at. But basically all the recommendations sit under recommendation 1, which is that Sheffield has to work to becoming an anti-city, an anti-racist city and anti-racist organisations within the city. So everything else feeds into recommendation 1. What is clear and what the evidence states, so again, after listening to all the evidence that's put forward, it's very, very clear that Sheffield has found to be a racist city. That's what the evidence states. So in order, we need to address this, change has to happen, and we have to improve race outcomes across the city. So obviously it makes sense that partners across the city will be held accountable through the legacy group, and I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a minute. But basically what it's saying is that organisations and communities need to be thinking about race outcomes within their organisation. So it doesn't matter what the size of your organisation is, or if you have an organisation that serves people, it doesn't matter whether you employ 3 people or 3,000 people, you need to be thinking about your race outcomes within this, especially if you're providing services to communities. So obviously organisations need to think about the responses, they need to be thought about carefully, targets need to be delivered carefully to maximise impact, and then we need to measure that impact to make sure that race outcomes are improving across the city. So targets need to be managed wisely, within achievable timescales. The Commission said within 3 years Sheffield should be an anti-racist city, but again we need to be working on that day by day, minute by minute to improve that. We can't wait for 3 years to be thinking about this, we need to be thinking about this now in order to move forward. And efforts to become an anti-racist organisation, if you're working within an organisation, needs to be a whole organisational approach. So it needs to gather the voice of everybody that's working within your organisation in order to make sure that that practice is embedded systemically. This is everybody's journey together. So it's about everybody having that voice, no matter where you are in a hierarchy, and in order to feed that back in order to deliver change. So the legacy group, a lot of people are kind of talking about the legacy group. Obviously, we are coming up to the year's anniversary of the Commission. What I can say is that the Race Equality Commission report stated that there should be a legacy group across the city that will measure the ongoing impact of and analyse data around race equality to make sure we are improving all the time as a city. Currently where this is sitting at the moment, it's sitting under the Sheffield City Partnership Board. So that is community representatives and anchor institutions that are coming together. They are currently working on a task and finish group. So by October, they should have this model in place. Really, really important. And I know a lot of people across the city might feel frustrated because this legacy group hasn't happened yet. But it's really, really important that we think about the capacity of that group, the funding, who's going to fund that group in order to make and deliver change, and how that is going to govern us. This legacy group has to be sustainable across the city. We know that funds are not easily available across the city, so it's about a group of people coming together to make sure that that model, that legacy group, has long-term ambition, it's sustainable in order to measure that impact. So what I would say, though, obviously we don't need, no organisation, no individual across this city has to wait for a legacy group to hold us to account in order to think about race. We need to be thinking about that as individuals and our organisations ourselves, and putting things in place ready. We shouldn't be waiting for a legacy group to tell us what to do. That's not the function of the legacy group. That's about our own individual practice and how we can improve ourselves in order to improve race outcomes. So what do we know about Sheffield? We know that it's a home, obviously, to approximately 500,000 people. Currently one of the UK's most culturally diverse cities, and we actually know from looking at census data that Sheffield is a growingly diverse city as well. So diversity is spreading across the city and areas are changing. So it could be that you're working in an area that historically hasn't been affected by huge amounts of diversity. However, we know from looking at census data that all of that picture is changing. So it's really, really important we need to start forward planning for things like that. We know it's roughly 14% of Sheffield citizens were not born in the UK, and obviously we know that Sheffield is home to 2 universities that attract worldwide students from across the world. So we need to be thinking very, very carefully. We know we're very culturally diverse as organisations. We know we need to know our communities that we're serving in order to serve them in the best possible way to meet their needs as well. So what do you know about the south of the city? I can't, sorry, I thought I'd have a screen in front of me. So that was just some data on the south. So we know that it's roughly home to about 80,000 people. And again, the majority of the age group bracket that sit within that is between 16 and, I can't read that, sorry, 64 is that?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's where concentration of age groups are. I can share this presentation, you can have a look at that. All this data is available if you go on to Local Insight. So that's the population. If we then break down the population, next slide please, we can see that's diversity. Sorry, I can't actually see that. Again, can we start off and see? Sorry, I can't read that from here. So basically, I think this one was saying, in terms of ethnicity, this breaks down ethnicity statuses within. So obviously, predominantly, I can't read that figure.
British,
58%, 59,000. Sorry, of those people are white British. It breaks down ethnicities basically. So it can show you the spread of the South Lac area. Again, I can go through this with people in more detail at the end, but it was just to kind of give you an overview of your South Lac area. Sorry, is that in there? Thank you. Yeah, that's great. So 59% roughly is white British compared to 18% who classify. And again, this is on census data that was gathered in 2021. 18,000 people non-white, 8,500 people within the South Lac area Asian. Nearly 4,000 identify as black. So it breaks down the area for you, so it might be useful for you to think about when you're planning or you're looking at your local areas. Next one was, again, if we're talking about race, religion is often in there as well, so it's talking about religious groups. Again, nearly 30,000 identify as Christians. What is very, very clear, we've got Buddhists, Hindus, Jewish, about 8,500 people within the South Lac area that identify as Muslims, Sikhs, other religions, and then 37,000 people that have put down no religion, although they might affiliate to a religion. Again, this is all census data, so this is individual feedback from individuals. So what's very, very clear... is that when we're talking about the south of the city, we're talking, again, it has a very diverse population in terms of age, ethnicity. Within that, again, we need to be thinking about intersectionality. So, for instance, somebody might identify as disabled, however, black as well. So we need to think about cross-protected characteristics because people will fit into more than one protected characteristic within that. We know there's many different languages spoken across the south of the city, many different cultures, religions and belief systems that will inform people's daily lives. We know that we have to be discussing race and how to improve race outcomes for our residents within the south of the city, and that should be at everybody's, the forefront of everybody's mind as well. And we know that this work historically works better when we do it collectively and in collaboration with one another. It works better when we share good practice, we identify barriers in order to improve outcomes, and we need to be learning from our communities. It's absolutely clear that this has to be worked on a cultural humility basis, so we need to be talking to our residents to see what they need, to see what they want in order for us to develop policy. So this is not about any of these institutions telling people what they should be doing. It's actually that two-way conversation, those two-way honest dialogue that needs to be taking place really in order to improve race outcomes for people. Sorry, I'm not clicking on here, sorry. So, just a bit of self-reflection, and again, I'm not going to spend a long time on this, but really just about if we are to improve race outcomes, which we know we have to do across the city, it's about starting off individually, thinking about our own lived experiences, our own exposure to race, so looking at through a race lens. So just questions, how well do we know ourselves, how well do we know our cities, our communities? Have you been exposed to diversity through your experiences? So, for instance, your schooling, your hobbies, your books that you read, your films that you watch, your holidays that you go on. Do we know or socialise with people of different colour, different religions, different cultures? How much do we appreciate that? How much do we know about our neighbours, for instance, living next door? Do we visit different diverse areas of Sheffield? What do we actually know about the demographics of Sheffield? Because, like I said, that is changing hugely as we move on. Do we know about the ethnic mix of Sheffield in your local area? I've just given you some of that information. How well do we use our census information, for instance, when we're informing or making policies or things like that. So do we use that information? Do we know our customers if we're providing services? What do we know about our customers? So it's just having all that insight and that thinking when you're planning things within your local area. Do you know your communities that you serve, or again, are you looking at it from your individual perspective? Are you seeing it from the perspective of your service users? So it's just those conversations that we need to be having on a day-to-day basis to improve race. And are we confident talking about race? Because race can be a subject that, you know, whether it's due to subject knowledge or the feeling of getting it wrong, are we confident in talking about race as a subject, and actually what support do you need in order to improve that? This isn't about everybody on any spectrum of anything that will be somewhere on their pathway on a different part of their journey. So some people, when they're talking about race, might be really, really confident in whether it's through lived experiences or people or families. Other people want to learn, so it's about bringing everybody together and taking people on a journey and progressing everybody's knowledge and understanding with this. Next slide, please. So again, questions to think about. So what are your challenges as an individual, a citizen of Sheffield, an organisation, for instance, or an employee or a manager or a senior leader when we're talking about race? What would you need to help you overcome any barriers that you might face in your day-to-day work? Do you, as an organisation, or the communities you're working with, do you know about the REC, for instance? There might be people in this room at the moment that this is the first time they've heard this. There might be people already on their journey within the Race Equality Commission. But like I said right at the beginning, this is a citywide initiative, so it affects everybody across every aspect. So, for instance, if you're struggling with hospital appointments or things like that, you know, everybody, all these key anchors and organisations across Sheffield have to make a difference. So what support do you need as an individual or a team to share this message, to get this message out to people that you're working with? And what tools would you need in order to support your own anti-racist practice or your own service delivery, whether that's subject knowledge, confidence, whilst you're talking about this, whether it's cost, terminology, resources, you know, how can we pull together to work collectively as citizens Sheffield to improve race outcomes across the city? So that really is, if we go to just the last slide, if possible. Like I said, I work for the Equality team. I'm available at any point to kind of help people with this discussion. Like I said, this is a whole citywide thing, so it doesn't belong with the council. The council, I can tell you, because I've been part of that team, we have, following the launch in July, we got together. Sheffield City Council have committed to change within improving race outcomes. A paper went to our strategy and resource team in December. So internally as a council, we have an action plan that's set out over the next 3 years. I'm just currently reviewing that as a 6-month thing. But like I said, all organisations across the city should be doing this, so it isn't about what's the council doing about this. Actually, it's what the hospitals doing about this, what are the universities doing about this, police, business, everything. It's a whole city initiative to move and improve this out. So it's about really reflecting on your own practice, your organisation's practice, how you're working with other people, and is your practice having that impact that it needs to have across for people who have faced major inequalities. Obviously, we need to improve outcomes. So it's really about a bit of self-reflection, really, really important, being honest, being reflective in your own practice. Like I said, when nobody's an expert on this, but actually if we're struggling to develop our understanding, we need to be calling out for help. We need to be sharing good practice across the city. This is not about, I do this better than you. This is about, this has worked for me. This is working really well to improve race outcomes. Let me share that with somebody else. We need to pull together this resource in order to improve. So that's really where I am. So like I said, Sheffield City Council has committed to this. We've set out an action plan. We've reviewed that action plan. It is a working document. If things are identified that aren't working, we will be changing those. This isn't something that's going to change overnight. We need to be honest in that. But however, we need to be working on this constantly. It needs to be at the forefront of everybody's minds in order to get to that place of becoming an anti-racist city within that 3-year window. Okay.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very, very much indeed for that. Does anyone have any questions? Doesn't look like. Any comments from Councillor Rove?
Richard, do that mic.
Sorry, Councillor Rove.
Do that mic, Richard. Sorry, that one. Right. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just obviously a few comments which I made previously, but one in particular. I mean, my question would be around how much is Sheffield State Council and its leadership, especially those in the upper echelons, taking this seriously when the legacy group was supposed to be set up quite a while ago. It's still not even been set up yet. In my mind, when something as simple as the legacy group cannot be set up yet, it actually shows that those at the top aren't taking this as seriously as they should be. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Waller.
Okay, Homaira, thank you for your insightful presentation. The feedback I'm getting from the community, both from citizens as well as community organisation, they don't feel that much has been done. They don't feel that the council has changed. There's a lot of frustration, and anger even are building. So if I can please pass that feedback on to you. And I do realise that this is a citywide report. It's not just the council as well as hospital and our organisation. But we must do more, and I'm very keen to work with anybody to get this report into action. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's very important that we're honest with each other. If I could just ask you perhaps to ask a question.
Yes, I want.
Obviously they looked into education and found out there was major inequalities, race inequalities within education. This is about ownership as well, and because education is a tricky one because a lot of it is academy owned now, so the council haven't got the power that they used to have in order to make those changes. However, there is a space that the council needs to get in with that, whether it's working with governors in order to improve and hold head teachers and school systems to account. So there is a piece of work, again, the education department had to identify their targets within our internal response. Like I said, I'm just reviewing those. If things aren't working as they should be, new targets will be put in place, but absolutely education is one of those really tricky areas that has to be cracked in this, because we know life outcomes for children. We need to be race education, and race starts at the age of 2 onwards. Research has shown that children's perceptions of race are formed from the age of 2, so we have to be talking about this, and we have to go into that uncomfortable space that actually, even though we haven't got that power over schools, we need to, and this is not saying it's got to be a collective approach, people have got to buy into this, people have got to actually realise the benefits that if we get this right, then the city as a whole will really, really prosper in a far bigger way than it has done before. But education is one of those very, very tricky areas, but absolutely, it did highlight the inequalities that do exist within education.
I've got Mr. Maroof, and then you before that. Did you want to specifically on this? I can just... So if you want to ask your question, and then I'll turn off.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My question will be, I am aware there are 5 community organisations, large community organisations representing most of the major black and minority ethnic communities in our city. Pakistan Muslim Centre, Sadaka, ISROC, Pakistan Advice Centre, working also with the Roman Slovak communities as well. So they have, and a couple of other community organizations, they have come together and they have found a solution to this problem to address some of the issues, such as how the community organization can be strengthened and giving them some more powers and resources. And their view is, in the past, our Section 106 money now is the Community Infrastructure Levy. So their campaign is, out of that one, if a BAM community infrastructure levy is set, where all those community organizations who are suffering either racism or historic injustice, so to address and get the resources to address those issues. But there's a response from other community organizations who represent the white community. So their response is that instead of dividing on the BAM lines or the ethnicity line, why don't we just get some chunk from the infrastructure levy and set up a community infrastructure levy that might be able to address the issues which has been raised. And it's a shame that our city has been considered the racist city in this day of age, particularly when our city is a city of sanctuary. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Bashrat, Councillor Diamond, and then Councillor Maroof.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, Homaira, thank you for this insight into the presentation, because obviously a lot of work has been put in with this. I was a community worker who fed into the data as well. But it's been 2 years of the compiling all the information, and the Commission has been involved. And if I'm right, I think it's going to be a year on Friday since the report's been presented. Clearly, obviously, it's not the current the governance isn't working. So I'm pleased to hear that you're working on a proper governance to be able to move this forward, so that all that hard work, because just like Ibi and Maruf mentioned, there's a lot of frustration out in the community, all that hard work put in, and it's something very serious, and it should be taken action on immediately. So yeah, thank you for raising the presentation as well.
Thank you, Councillor Diamond.
Yeah, thank you. I do agree with what a lot of the points that have been made previously, especially the disappointment that there has not been a legacy group set up yet. I think that from speaking to people that were part of the Race Equality Commission, I feel like it was on the shoulders of people from black and minoritised communities that had to do the work in the first place, and maybe it needs to come from everywhere, and real resources need to be put in if we're going to take this seriously. I mean, there is structural racism across the city in housing and schooling. Schooling we touched on, particularly problems with like representation in the governing board of schools, the exclusion rate amongst black boys in particular, the problems with policing, with stop and search, which we are well documented, and other things like house raids, and also just how people are treated differently depending on their race. I mean, we've got big problems with accessibility of our council services. Does everyone have the same access to council services? If you speak, if English is not your first language, and you ring a number and it's got a multi-choice option, how are you going to get any help from that telephone line? And some people have easier access to counsellors, and they're aware of services a lot more than others. It's something that we need to look at. I'd also question.
Can I ask you to wind it up?
Oh yeah, sorry. How LACS help with this? Because what we've had sometimes is people applying for funding from LACS, but because a community might be more dispersed around the city, they say, well, this is not really an area-based application, and that might be rejected. So maybe we need some resources, particularly to help. And I'd also sort of just raise the discrimination that the Gypsy, Rover and Traveller community faces in Sheffield, and that is unfortunately from political campaigning as well, from political parties. It's not, so we need to take that really seriously as well when we're considering the Race Equality Commission.
Thank you, Councillor Diamond. Councillor Maroof.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be extremely brief on this one. Councillor Turpin and I were in a meeting recently, education, and he's specifically addressing the education issue, where there was Councillor Turpin, and I were at the same meeting, and we were privileged to listen to 20 young people from various different communities, minority communities, saying they are still suffering the same sort of issues that I probably was suffering from 40 years ago. We don't seem to have made any progress whatsoever. And I was a commissioner on this Race Equality Commission, the report that we've got in front of you. And I'll be perfectly honest, I mean, sometimes we as a local authority need to look at ourselves first before we start telling other people what to do. And clearly there are issues within the authority itself, and it's well recorded. We mentioned that in the committee as well. And we gave a pledge to the young people there who didn't have a problem with English. Their English was even probably better than mine. That is not the issue. They still seem to think that there are barriers which are being put in front of them. And that is not just the young people themselves, it's also the teachers. There are very few diverse teaching staff members within schools as well. And if there are any, and again, I keep referring to Councillor Turpin, but they were quite vociferous about the fact that some of the teachers feel really difficult in terms of calling out issues like this, because they then get targeted themselves. So basically what I'm actually saying is this has been going on from the last 40 or 50 years, and listening to those children on that particular day, the young people, just brought it on to me and said, look, 40 years on, fourth generation, and we're still talking about the same issues that were around in the 70s. There is something wrong. It's not right. We can do as many reports as we like. Unless we actually action those reports, nothing is going to change. I'm on record as saying you can send people on many courses. This has been repeated in 3 committees that I've been on in the last 10 days, the same subject. You can send people on courses. Unless people's hearts and minds change, things are not going to change. But 40 years on, I'm still a bit sceptical about where we're heading towards. But we have a serious responsibility as an authority, and we should be held to account on this. This is what the young people said. You need to be held to account on this. And we've given them the pledge that they should come back to us and deal with that. Plus, we have issues in other parts of the cities which are not on a sort of race issue. Inequality amongst people as well. And as I said earlier, there are a number of issues. I'm quite disturbed by it, to be honest with you, Chair.
Thank you very, very much for that. Councillor Turpin.
Thank you. To be honest, I don't think there's much left for me to say, but just to expand on what Mohammed was saying there. I mean, it was a really powerful session, wasn't it? And you know, it makes me really angry that nothing has been done. Like I would say, nothing has been done, nothing has changed, nothing from the recommendations have been implemented, and you still get people in the council claiming that targets have been met. You know, even in that committee, in that there was written answers where they were claiming that they were doing things that the week before they were literally doing the opposite of what they were claiming to be doing. You know, they do need to be honest and say that, you know, the council is just as racist now as it was before. And the disparity in education, I've had the displeasure of coming across it recently and have some insight, and it's just really upsetting. And I think if we're not being proactively anti-racist, then we are just being racist. You know, there's none of this like, oh, it's okay, I didn't understand. Once someone's lived through the trauma of being discriminated against or had their career ruined, you know, it's too late. It's not good enough. Unless we as a council and unless our partners are being actively anti-racist, then nothing will change. And yeah, I just really despair. I just find it really upsetting, and we just need to really make sure that we hammer it home. I think one thing that's really clear is that the diversity of the city isn't represented at senior levels in the council, but also in other organisations. Had the same conversation, more or less, that we had in the education committee, Mohammed, in housing, and they're saying that, well, the diversity is represented in all the lower paid jobs, but it's utterly bereft of diversity at the top level. And even when we look at the council, you know, there's one person of colour in an executive director role, and that's the first person that Sheffield has ever had of colour at that level in the council. You know, it's just not good enough. And how are we to expect to get more diversity when everybody making the decisions looks the same?
Thank you, Councillor Turpin. Councillor Roof.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to answer the particular point about schools. I have first-hand experience. I've worked in 2 schools in Sheffield. I've worked in 3 additional schools as a cover teacher as well. And I can say one of the biggest issues we have in schools within Sheffield is around the workforce not being representative and racially literate. How can the school understand why a child has not done their homework or why they are tired if they don't understand what has been going on with that child's education at home? One of the biggest issues we have around education in Sheffield, especially around the southwest, which I saw in teachers quite often, was around the misunderstanding, the deliberate misunderstanding, I would say, from certain sections of the teaching staff around Muslim children going to after-school Islamic classes, and you know that's part of their heritage. That's part of those children's heritage. That's what those children want to do. and those teachers had no right to interfere in that. And that's one of the issues, I came across quite significantly. In regards to governorship, I can tell you around the local authority school, the one local authority secondary school that we have remaining in Sheffield, the governance is not representative of the pupils within that school, and that's around all, not just at that one particular school, but around all of the academies within the school, within the city. And until the schools are representative, nothing's going to change, unfortunately, because education starts from a very early age, and we need to get that firmly into schools, that you need to educate not only your workforce, but also to have make sure that the curriculum reflects and embeds Black, Asian and minoritized ethnic histories as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I'll research it and have a look.
Okay, probably about 30 minutes.
Thank you, Joy.
Probably hasn't changed.
Go for it.
Yeah, I would say absolutely. It's really important that we keep listening all the time, because otherwise we're not going to identify what needs to change. I would say come through the equality team if we need to. My details are on there. If not, I'll leave them with you. We can then pass that on to the relevant things. So if it's education, for instance, we'll make a commitment. Education is a passion of mine. I've spent my previous career in education, so I know exactly what you're talking about. Again, like Councillor Maroof, I've been on the receiving end of that inequality within education, so absolutely I'll pass whatever information I am given to the right department. That will feed into our internal response, but we need to hear that. We need people to come forward with all their lived experiences in order so we can identify what needs to change. So yeah, please do pass that information forward.
Okay. I've got the lady in the pink jacket and the chap specifically on that, if you can, very quickly. Thanks, and we'll send out all this information after the meeting.
I was just wondering if your charity, and I'm wondering if you would support the sector organisations so that they can review the services they're delivering and work towards the objectives that you're stating, make sure the services are diverse and delivered to various concerns.
Absolutely. I'd say if there's anybody out there that needs any support in anything that we've talked about tonight around this, please do get in touch with us. We're there to help and educate and inform and develop practice. So absolutely, that's an offer that we have as an equality team. That if you do need some help and support, we will work with you. So please be in touch. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. I'll now hand over to Diane Owens, who's going to give us a brief update on the South Local Area Committee budget for this year.
Thanks, Chair. I can be very brief because it was a brief report. So there was a report in the agenda pack which just gave you a bit of an overview of the South LAC budget. So within the report, I just kind of give you a bit of an overview in terms of the budget for last financial year. So last financial year,
the South Lek was allocated £100,000. So within the agenda pack, page 23 and 24 of the report just gives you an overview of how that budget was allocated, and we have given ongoing updates and feedback through these meetings and through the reports that have come. But it gives you an overview of that spend. It confirms that of that £100,000, £31,930 have been carried forward into this financial year. So that's on page 24, just gives you a list of the projects which have been carried forward into this financial year, which includes the street art project, looking at purchasing some additional mobile CCTV cameras, and doing some work around supporting capacity building in the voluntary community sector. So that's the kind of projects that have been carried forward into this year. Then for this financial year, each local area committee has been allocated an additional £100,000. And this report is just letting you know about that, really. It doesn't include any proposal at the moment for spending that. The intention of the committee really is to do some reflection now in terms of the community plan that we've got. So our spend needs to be in line with the community plan, the priorities in that community plan. And that is available online, and we do send links out to that quite frequently. But the intention now is to reflect on that community plan, have a think, is there anything missing? Obviously, over the last few months, members have been out speaking a lot to local people, to local residents, gathering a lot of community intelligence. So the intention is to have some time to just have a bit of a reflection, talk to some of our kind of key voluntary community sector organisations as well, identify is there anything missing from that plan, does it need some tweaks, some amendments, and then come back in the October with some thoughts around priorities and potentially around some spend of that budget. So this is just a report basically just kind of wrapping up where we are from last financial year, giving you a sense of the budget for this year, and just sort of giving you an indication then about what the plans are in terms of that community plan and priorities for this year.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, I think we'll just note that report, colleagues, and move on to the close of the evening. So thank you all very much indeed for attending this meeting of the South Local Area Committee. I hope you found the meeting useful and informative. The formal meeting has now finished. We were going to hold some workshops around the Race Equality Commission. It does feel like we've kind of started those workshops. I'm not entirely certain how much of that we're going to be doing afterwards. If you are going to leave right now, thank you very much for coming. As always, we'll send around a short survey for your feedback on the meeting. Please do fill that in and let us know what you think. If you haven't already signed up for our South Local Area Committee mailing list, please speak to one of our officers. If you did ask a question, please also do make sure that we've got your details so that we can get that. The next meeting will be on Thursday, 12th of October, 6 to 8 p.m. again, at a venue to be confirmed. Thank you all once again. Good night.